The girl who gave everything. The December snow fell in thick, silent flakes across the city streets, blanketing everything in a pristine white that would soon turn gray with the footprints of countless strangers. Steam rose from manholes like ghostly fingers, and the yellow glow of streetlights created small circles of warmth in the gathering darkness of early evening. Emma Rodriguez pulled her worn tan coat tighter around her shoulders as she walked down Fifth Avenue. The coat had seen better days. Its fabric was thin in places, and one of the buttons hung by a thread, but it was all she had between herself and the bitter cold. At 19, Emma had been living on the streets for 8 months, ever since aging out of the foster care system with nowhere to go and no family to turn to. In her hand, she clutched a small paper bag containing a day-old sandwich and an apple, her dinner, purchased with the few dollars she had earned helping to unload delivery trucks earlier that morning. Her stomach had been gnawing at her all day, but she had learned to ignore hunger. It was just another companion in her daily struggle to survive. That as she turned the corner onto a quieter side street, Emma noticed an elderly man sitting against the brick wall of an old apartment building. His clothes were even more tattered than hers, a threadbare jacket that might have once been brown, pants with holes at the knees, and shoes held together with what looked like electrical tape. His gray beard was unkempt, and his weathered hands shook slightly as he tried to shield himself from the falling snow. But it was his eyes that stopped Emma in her tracks. They held the same hollow look she had seen in her own reflection countless times, the look of someone who hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks, the look of someone who had given up hope that things might get better. Emma stood there for a long moment, the snow collecting on her blonde hair as she watched the old man. She thought about her own hunger, about how she had been looking forward to that sandwich all day, but then she looked at his trembling hands again, at the way he seemed to be shrinking into himself against the cold, and she knew what she had to do. "Excuse me, sir," Emma said softly, approaching the man with careful steps. She didn't want to startle him. The elderly man looked up, his eyes focusing on her with surprise. It had probably been a long time since anyone had spoken to him with kindness. "I have this sandwich," Emma continued, kneeling down so she was at his eye level, "and an apple. I thought maybe, well, you look like you might be hungry." She held out the paper bag, her hand steady despite the cold. The man stared at the offering for a moment, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. "You sure, miss?" he asked, his voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "You look like you could use it yourself." Emma smiled. And despite everything she had been through, it was a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'm sure. Please, take it." The old man accepted the bag with hands that shook not just from cold, but from emotion. "Bless you, child. Bless you." Emma squeezed his shoulder gently. "What's your name?" "Walter," he said, already unwrapping the sandwich with reverent care. "Walter Morrison. I'm Emma Rodriguez." She stood up slowly. "I wish I had more to give you, Walter." "You've given me more than you know," Walter said, his eyes glistening. "More than you know." What Emma didn't know was that their entire interaction had been observed by someone sitting in a black luxury SUV parked just across the street. Marcus Wellington had been on his way home from a late business meeting when his driver had stopped at the red light. Through the falling snow, he had watched the young woman approach the homeless man, had seen her give away what appeared to be her own meal without hesitation. Marcus was no stranger to charity. His company, Wellington Industries, donated millions to various causes each year. He attended fundraising galas, wrote checks, and felt good about doing his part. But sitting in his heated car watching this girl who clearly had nothing give away everything she had, Marcus felt something shift inside him. He instructed his driver to wait and continued watching. As Emma said goodbye to Walter and began walking away, she moved slowly, and Marcus could see her shoulders sagging slightly, whether from hunger, cold, or exhaustion. He couldn't tell. Probably all three. "Follow her," Marcus told his driver quietly, "but keep some distance." They drove slowly behind Emma for several blocks until she turned into an alley between two buildings. Marcus got out of the SUV and walked to the mouth of the alley, where he could see Emma settling down beside a dumpster, using a piece of cardboard as a barrier between herself and the cold concrete. She pulled her thin coat around her and leaned back against the brick wall, closing her eyes. Marcus stood there for several minutes, snow accumulating on his expensive wool coat as he thought about what he had just witnessed. This girl, who was living on the streets with nothing, had given her only meal to someone she perceived as needier than herself. In his world of corporate meetings and profit margins, such selfless compassion was rare. The next morning, Marcus returned to the alley early, bringing coffee and breakfast sandwiches. Emma was still there, awake but looking tired and cold. "Emma Rodriguez," Marcus said gently. Emma looked up, startled. She didn't recognize this well-dressed man, and her first instinct was wariness. "I'm Marcus Wellington," he continued, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I saw what you did last night." For Walter, Emma's face flushed. "I don't know what you mean." "You gave him your dinner," Marcus said simply, "when you clearly needed it yourself." Emma looked down at her hands. Anyone would have done the same thing. Marcus shook his head. "No, Emma, not everyone would have. In fact, very few people would have." He held out the coffee and food. "Please, let me buy you breakfast. I'd like to talk to you about something." Over the next hour, as they sat in a nearby diner, Marcus learned Emma's story. He discovered that she was intelligent and articulate, that she had been working toward her GED before homelessness derailed her plans, and that despite everything she had been through, she maintained an optimism and kindness that he found remarkable. "I'd like to offer you a job," Marcus said finally, "and an apartment. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. In return, I'd like you to help me with something I've been thinking about, a foundation that helps young people aging out of foster care, someone who's been through it, who understands what it's really like." Emma stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Why?" she whispered. Marcus thought about that night in the snow, about watching her give away her last meal to a stranger. "Because you reminded me what real kindness looks like," he said, "and I think the world needs more people like you in positions where they can help others." 6 months later, Emma stood in the conference room of Wellington Industries, leading a meeting about the new Emma Rodriguez Foundation for Foster Youth. Through the large windows, she could see the street where she had once walked hungry and cold. Sometimes, she thought, the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes, not just in the lives we touch, but in our own lives as well.